Let me welcome Dr. Michael L. Lomax, President and CEO of the United Negro College Fund, which is the nation's largest private provider of scholarships and other educational support to not only, and this is something that maybe a lot of people don't know, Dr. Lomax, not only African Americans.
Well, you know, historically black colleges are historically black. They're not exclusively black. They were founded for African Americans, and because no one else would educate us. But, you know, they've always been integrated in educational environments. They were, in some cases, founded by black denominations right after the Civil War, but in other cases they were founded by traditionally white denominations. The United Methodist Church founded institutions. The old Congregationalist Church, the United Church of Christ, founded. Every one of the denominations founded one, and so the faculties and the administrators were often missionaries. And their own children attended those institutions. So we had white kids on these campuses from the beginning. But today, depending on the institution, you take, say, Xavier University in New Orleans, large Vietnamese population. Because
of the immigrants that settled in
and they love that pharmacy program at Xavier. At Houston-Tillotson in Austin, Texas, a large Mexican-American population at the school. In Charlotte, North Carolina, at Johnson C. Smith, they are intentionally reaching out into the community there to bring other students. The graduate programs, Joe, have always had, they've always been racially mixed. You know, when I went to Morehouse in the 60s, Atlanta University, now Clark Atlanta University, had Chinese and South Asian students and white students pursuing master's and doctoral degrees. At Howard,
the reason I try now. Let's because here's like sometimes I like to play the devil's advocate. There would be those who would argue, well, they do it because I have this saying: in America, we're culturally conditioned to undervalue, underestimate, and marginalize what's black.
Yes,
and there'll be those that say, well, that you attract them because it's a marginal. They get a marginal education. They're not as competitive as the other schools.
You know, it's just not true. I mean, in some cases, these institutions in their earlier days were providing the best education you could find in some of those communities. And they've always been, you know, we've never had the resources at the historically black colleges that they've had at major universities. But they've had extraordinary faculties and very strong students. During World War II, Ralph Bunch, this is not often known, one of his jobs was helping to relocate Jewish professors from Western Europe who had come to the United States to flee Nazi Germany. And there was anti-Semitism, so a lot of these professors who had extraordinary backgrounds were not permitted to teach couldn't
get into the Ivy League
and so
WASP schools.
A lot of these faculty members enriched historically black colleges by going to Tougaloo in Mississippi, by going to Talladega in Alabama, Hampton University, Howard University. So I would just say to you that that they've been extraordinary places. One other point: African Americans up until quite recently who had advanced degrees couldn't get jobs teaching anywhere else except historically black colleges, and we've always had very strong faculties. So you know, I went to Morehouse College. I graduated in
and you taught at Morehouse.
And I taught at Morehouse, and I graduated in 1968. I went from there seamlessly to Columbia University to get my master's, and then ultimately to Emory to get my PhD. I had great faculty members from Harvard and University of Chicago and Yale when I was an undergraduate at Morehouse, and they got a pretty good faculty member in me from Columbia and Emory. Taught at Spelman. I was president of Dillard University. We had competitive faculties.
I'm going to read this article from Giselle Hunt. I don't know if you saw it, from the Houston Forward Times. Title, a mind is a wonderful thing to invest in.
Yes.
And when I was at your speech at the National Press Club, and for the first time, 42 years, and have you expound on this, United Negro College Fund has altered its signature phrase. A mind is not only a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in. Just expand on that.
Well, 42 years ago, when Vernon Jordan was president and CEO of UNCF, he went to Wall Street. I mean, not to Wall Street, to Madison Avenue, and got Young and Rubicam, a premier advertising company, to help us take our annual campaign, from just solicitations, letters written by, and the first campaign was John D. Rockefeller Jr., solicitations of wealthy people, to actually advertising and telling that story through media. And they came up with a slogan. A mind is a terrible thing to waste. Well, I don't think anybody expected that slogan would last for 42 years, that it would go into the Hall of Fame, slogan Hall of Fame, and that it would have had the kind of electric impact that it had 42 years ago. Millions of dollars started flowing into UNCF as a result of that campaign. And it has lived a strong life. Mm-hmm. We felt, as we wanted to reintroduce UNCF to a new generation, we had to make this not about charity, because this isn't just a charitable donation that we're asking people to make, but really to reframe it for the 21st century. And the reframing is that this isn't charity, this is an investment. It's an investment in that individual student, and the repayment, the dividend is going to be this student is going to contribute to America and build a strong economy here. But it is an investment in our community, our individuals, our community, and our nation. And so there's a return on that investment.
But it's also not only contribute to America, but as you pointed out, it's also it's global now.
Look, for our country to be successful, we have to produce the talent that will compete with China, with India, with Western Europe. We need the talent that can make sure that this economy is preeminent in the world. And that means we can't write off anybody. And African American kids, Latino kids, may start off low income, but if they get a great education, they can not only move up the economic ladder, they can produce new ideas and new ways of doing things that will be good for the American economy.
I'll give you another slogan, one that I've used here, and I'm going to take credit for it.
Okay.
That education is the new currency of the 21st century.
Yeah.
It's really the new currency. The person with that education. And I want to get into this because and you said something that just I wanted to say amen when you spoke at the press club. Mm-hmm. Inevitably, if I opened up the lines now, we would get calls from people who say, everybody doesn't want to go to college.
Yeah.
You guys always talking about college. Everybody doesn't want to go to college. You spoke to that eloquently, and tell people what you said, because that's the other reason I wanted you to speak to this audience.
Well, first of all, normally when somebody says, well, not everybody needs to go to college, they're not talking about themselves or their own children. And it's usually the people they have in mind have darker skins, and they want to say, well, not everybody's really college material. That may be the case, but I think we should not look at somebody and say because of the way they look or their income or where they live that they're automatically not college material. We ought to say they are automatically college material, and we ought to prepare them for it. And if they make another choice at some point along the line, that will be their choice. It won't be because they didn't have the opportunity to get the education that would prepare them for college. The second thing I'd say is that in the 20th century, a high school diploma up till about World War II was sufficient education to navigate the workforce that you were in. So, I get a high school diploma. I can read. I can write. I can leave Alabama, stop picking cotton, and go up to Detroit and help Mr. Ford make cars, or go over to Pittsburgh and in a steel mill.
Oh, I could graduate from high school, go in where I grew up in Dayton, Ohio, and there's Dayton Tire and Rubber, there's Inland, there's National Cash Register.
That's right.
There's Delco.
And so these are going to be, in some way, skilled labor jobs, but they do require literacy and numeracy, but not much beyond that. In the 21st century, there aren't many jobs.
Speak to them now.
That will provide you with something other than a minimum wage, entry-level jobs that do not require advanced skills. So you're going to have to go and get either a certification, an Associate of Arts degree, or the skill levels represented by a bachelor's degree to be competitive in the 21st century. And not only are you going to get that new, better job, if you're going to hold on to that new, better job and move on to the next one, you're going to continue to develop your skills throughout your life. So education, to your point, that is the currency of the 21st century. It used to be that, you build up the muscles, and that's what's going to help you do the hard labor. Well, all the hard labor of the 21st century is going to be the big muscle you're going to use is the brain. I'll give you a good example. I do a lot of flying in my job, and I always watch the guy who is fixing the escalator at the airport. And he isn't in there with a wrench and a screwdriver. He's in there with a computer because everything now, all the machines operate by computer. So I would say, to your point,
the auto mechanic.
The auto mechanic. Look, and the auto mechanic who is making $100,000 a year.
Thank you.
Is sitting there with a computer, and he's putting in he's typing that in. Why shouldn't black kids have that opportunity?
And you said something else. I want you to know I was listening very carefully. You said something else that what from your experience, people end up. Oftentimes they go back and forth.
That's right.
Yeah, and you might want to talk about that. They go in and out.
So just so that we will understand, of the 100% of people who are pursuing some post-high school degree today, only about 20% of them have just graduated from high school and are going on to college, and will do that in 4 to 6 years. 80% are people who are going in and out. It's called episodic attainment. They're going in and out of the educational system. They're getting, some college, and then they go back and say, I got to take some more courses, or I may not get my degree, but I will have, I'll be competent in this work. So there's a large percentage of Americans in the workforce today who have some college. There's a large percentage of them who have gotten certified to do the work, and then there are people who are pursuing terminal degrees, either an Associate of Arts degree or a Bachelor of Arts degree. But the fact about all of these people who are mobile and are succeeding in the system is that they're continuously getting more education, enhancing their skills, enhancing their competencies, so that they are employable.
Yeah. Now, how many scholarships does United Negro College Fund give out each year?
It's a growing number. That's the good news. This year, we will give out around 12,000 scholarships valued at over $100 million.
How many applications do you get for scholarships?
We will get a minimum of 120,000 applications. We will get, on average, 10 applications for every scholarship, but in some cases way more. Yesterday we're looking at a scholarship that we'll award very soon that Usher, the performer, is helping to fund. For that one scholarship, which is about $25,000 a year, 170 applicants
for one scholarship.
One scholarship.
And you say you got to decide. Who decides who gets that scholarship? Is there a committee?
We have professionals who this is all they do is read scholarship applications and help us make the awards. So this is not these kids are really serious about having their application reviewed and reviewed thoughtfully. So we've got good people doing that.
The Gates Foundation, billion?
$1,600,000,000 over 20 years.
Now, people will immediately think, my God, $1 billion, you don't need any more money.
Yeah, that's not the case.
Why not?
Because that $1,600,000,000 will pay for 20,000 students who will be able, when they receive that award, and 17,000 of them have been awarded to date. We've got 3 more years of awards on that program, 1,000 students a year. Those students get that award senior year of high school. They've been admitted to all the colleges that they've selected, and we will pay whatever the college itself doesn't pay.
And it's not just United Negro College.
Oh, no. No, it is not. But the reason why Bill and Melinda Gates selected us is because we have such vast experience providing scholarships. And it's not just African Americans. 35% of these students are African American, 35% are Latino, 15% are Asian Pacific Islander, and 15% are Native Americans. 100% of them are low-income Pell-eligible students. 100% of them are very high-performing students. So they will go to any college or university that they select, and a large number of them, of the African-American ones, do choose historically black colleges.
So that 1 billion runs out soon.
It will run out in about another 12 years. There'll be a little bit of a surplus, so we're in discussions with Bill and Melinda Gates about what they're going to do with this. Well, a little bit of a surplus for that is a couple of $100 million.
Yeah. Let's take a pause here, and this leads me to talk about this whole Parent Plus loan controversy. And you said something, and that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you on, because folks in the administration do listen to this program. And I was somewhat disappointed to find out how the change came about without the input of a United Negro College Fund and presidents at historically black colleges and the impact that it had. All right, Michael Lomax is with us. I was mentioning to Dr. Lomax that I should have brought it with me, this Ebony magazine that I can't think of what year it was. Maybe it was 1976, or it might have been before that. Might have been around 1976, but Ebony magazine, first issue of the first class. This was the issue of the 50 future leaders of Black America.
Right.
And I was with Sharon Malone, Dr. Sharon Malone, and she we were going through the magazine, and there was Sharon Malone on one side of Joe Madison.
Yeah.
And they did in alphabetical order, and on the other side was Michael Lomax.
We're dating ourselves.
I'm telling you. And I've always said to Ebony, to Johnson, they ought to do a reunion because Alexis Herman's in that class.
Well, to give you one other, there used to be a magazine, I think maybe still it's Us Magazine, and they did 30 leaders, well, I don't think it was 30 under 30, but, it was 30 around 30, something like that. And Bill Clinton and I were in that, and
wow.
Some of those things they're wonderful. They were wonderful at the time. They're kind of scary now.
They are. Yeah, they really, especially when you see these huge froze. Everybody had these huge froze, at the time. But let's go to this issue about the Parent Plus loan. Right. Now, let's start with, for people who don't know, what is the Parent Plus loan? What was the Parent Plus loan?
Well, let me just start with context, and that is that for most African Americans and many low-income to moderate-income Americans, if they're going to pursue college, they have to have 3 sources of financial support. One is they'll have to have, hopefully, some family savings.
All right.
that they can apply to paying for college. Number two, they're going to want some scholarships or grants. And number three, if the two of those don't add up to paying for everything, they're going to probably have to borrow. And the largest lender to students in the country is the federal government. And the federal government has a number of programs where the student himself or herself can sign and borrow, and will be responsible for paying back
after graduation.
After graduation, that's right.
Okay.
And but there's also, in some cases, there is a very large program where parents will sign and borrow to support and make a decision that they're going to help pay for their students, their son or daughter, family member, to get an undergraduate or a graduate or professional degree.
Is there a maximum amount that they can borrow, and what is the percentage?
Actually, that's a pretty quote unquote liberal program, and so it will cover the total cost of attendance. So those can be very large loans. They can be in the tens of thousands of dollars annually.
Okay, so you go ahead.
So and then for the parent to borrow,
right,
there are criteria about the credit worthiness of the parent,
not the student, but of the parent.
Of the parent.
All right.
Let me just say, there are millions of people borrowing on this program. This is not some small program; it's a very large one. In the fall of 2011,
right,
at the end, just as we're coming out of a great recession, where a lot of people have lost employment or have been delayed on paying bills, the federal government decided to tighten the credit requirements for borrowing in the Parent Plus program. And they did that. Normally, if they're going to change the criteria for people to borrow, they would have to give public notice. They would have to go through a very open and public process. And in fact, they didn't do that. They just changed the credit requirements and gave minimal notice of the change. But the changes they made were that if you had delays in paying bills or had some blemish on your credit over the last 5 years, and remember this
during this recession,
you would be ineligible to borrow. And so nobody really noticed it until the fall of 2012, when students showed up on college campuses, and many of them returning students, and their families had expected to sign for a Parent Plus loan, and
found they weren't eligible.
400,000 across the country found out they were ineligible, and 28,000 at historically black colleges were denied loans that year.
Across the board, 28,000.
28,000.
And many of those 28,000 just couldn't enroll.
Well, they showed up on a day in September when they're, right before classes start. They're going to fill out their financial aid and register, and they were denied.
Now, you made the point during the speech that what disturbed you was that there was really no discussion, there was no process, and that it should have been a process. The administration should have done what? Sat down with university presidents, yourself, and others?
Well, they have a rule-making process,
okay,
and it is a highly public process. And in fact, they're going through what they call negotiated rulemaking right now, and they make a big. It's highly visible. The entire higher education community knows about it. They are looking at a number of issues in there, and including now the Parent Plus loan. But they made that decision, and they said to us, when we went to them and said, look, we don't understand why all of a sudden parents who got a loan last semester can't get a loan this year. And they said, oh, well, we changed the criteria.
Were parents defaulting on the loan?
Well, no, the parents were not. They had no. We don't have any information on default, and they couldn't have defaulted because they weren't even actually paying the loans back at that stage.
So there wasn't any record of default. There wasn't any indication.
There was no indication, and
All
so what happened was that the department said, oh, well, we made a mistake, but we still think it's the right thing to have done, so we're not going to change our policy on it.
I know Danny Davis, Congressman Danny
Yes.
Davis, has been dogged on this, and I talked with him after your speech, and he said, Joe, we have all we get is we just talk, and nobody seems to want to make any changes.
Well, and here's the deal. A couple of points I'd make. Number one is that I don't think Congressman Davis, certainly UNCF, doesn't want parents to borrow more than they can afford to pay in return. And I don't want to see as many students having to borrow. But, you know, we don't have grants. We have something called the Pell Grant, which has not increased in its buying power. So students need to go to college and they can't pay for it. And the federal government has said, you know, give them scholarships or give them more, but we don't want them to borrow. Well, that just doesn't work. We don't have that kind of resource at our colleges to pay for this. And so I think that the administration has dug in their heels. And the result of this is that over 28,000 students at historically black colleges were denied in year one. They made some slight changes, but really no appreciable increase in the number of students who are eligible or parents who are eligible for the loans. And we've seen institutions lose enrollment as a result.
And now, is there also the issue that the institutions have to collect the loans at some point?
Well, there are two issues on the loans that are signed for by the students. The universities are required to ensure that the students do repay at a certain rate, and they're held accountable for that. Now, I don't believe they should be. I mean,
you made an observation about how they do it in Australia.
In Australia, it's the federal government that does all of the loan collecting for students, and I think that they're better equipped for it. It's a distraction from the academic work that our universities need to do. On the Parent Plus, they have no responsibility in the collection. We don't even know what the parent default rate is. So it's not clear that there are parents defaulting at a high rate or that they're defaulting at a high rate at black colleges. Final point on these loan programs. The federal government will make $50 billion on these federal loan programs over the next decade, about $5 billion a year. There are parents who are defaulting. There are students who are defaulting on them. But by and large, these are programs where the feds are making money right now. And I don't believe the federal government should be in the money-making business. They should have lower interest rates. They should have lower origination rates. They should have more forgiving repayment rates on all of them, because it's in the interest of the country for us to get these students to graduate and get degrees.
Now, if you had to speak to the administration, and what would you ask them to do? I mean, what would Dr. Lomax ask them to do to resolve? We only have 2 minutes. You're telling me in my ear to resolve this issue.
We would say go back to the old credit standards that you had before. And if you're going to make any changes, make them in an open and public way, but make them from where we were before, not from where we are today, because the credit standards that you have in place today are too restrictive. They are not enabling African American parents to get loans. And let me just say this: why would you punish a hardworking parent who is today employed because during the recession they were unemployed, because during the recession they missed some payments? If today they're base it on a more forgiving credit history. Don't have a 5-year look back, which is what they have today.
Yeah. Finally, the one issue that I have you speak for, if you could do it quickly, and that is, again, the significance, the need for historically black colleges. That argument, and that it always comes up. Why do we need
We need black colleges because black students want to go there. Today, African American students are in record numbers applying to attend historically black colleges because they are oftentimes the first in their family to go to college, and they want to go to an institution which feels like family, feels like home, will treat them like an individual, not like a statistic, and will let them know where they came from and will prepare them for a competitive future in America.
That's why my daughter Shauna chose Howard.
And that's why my daughter, Rachel, is at Howard
right.
today.
Is that right? All right. Now, finally, the fundraiser coming out. Real quick, 30 seconds, they tell me.
So on April the 6th at the Civic Center in Atlanta, we'll be taping an Evening of Stars, and it will be broadcast on BET on April the 13th. So check your local listing, watch it on BET, and then it will be syndicated at the end of May.
And people will have an opportunity to
contribute. They will be able to go to www.uncf.org and contribute online, or they will be able to call 1-800 number, make a contribution, and they will be able to text to donate, because we are raising money. Why? Because a mind is a terrible thing to waste, but a wonderful thing to invest in.
All right, we'll close out on that. Dr. Lomax, thanks for coming in, and we'll talk again. We have to keep this, and we'll keep the pressure on the administration. I think they just need to revisit this.
Amen.
Okay. All right.